Imagine a world where Russia, as we know it today, didn't exist. Instead, the land was a collection of small, struggling states living under the long shadow of the Mongol Empire. For 3 centuries, the people lived in fear, paying tribute to powerful Khans. But everything changed in the autumn of 1552. A young man, 22 years old, stood before the massive walls of a fortress that had defied his ancestors for generations. He wasn't there to talk, and he wasn't there to ask for peace. He was there to erase a kingdom from the map and build an empire in its place. This is the moment history shifted. The summer of 1552 was fading into a cold autumn, and the air over the Volga River was starting to bite. On the hills surrounding the city of Kazan, an army larger than anything these lands had ever seen began to spread out like a dark tide. There were 150,000 men in total. Russian soldiers, tough Cossack cavalry, and even some Tatar warriors who had decided to side with Moscow against their own people. Alongside them were German engineers with massive cannons and priests carrying holy icons. At the very center of this massive camp, sitting beneath a silk tent decorated with the double-headed eagle, code was Ivan IV. History would come to know him as Ivan the Terrible. He hadn't come to Kazan to negotiate or collect taxes. He had come with a cold determination to prove that Moscow, not the remains of the Mongol Empire, would rule these rivers and forests. He wanted to see how Ivan the Terrible forged the Russian Empire by crushing the very state that had tormented his people for so long. Behind the massive wooden walls and dirt ramparts of Kazan, 40,000 people looked out at the Russian lines. They knew this was the end of an era. The Khanate of Kazan was the last great successor of the Golden Horde that was still free. For 300 years, these walls had stood strong. Mongol Khans had ruled from this fortress, and thousands of Russian slaves had been marched through its gates. But the balance of power had shifted. Moscow had grown strong while the Mongols had grown weak. And Ivan had brought something that defenders had never seen: European siege artillery and explosive mines. The siege began in August. Ivan didn't just throw his men at the walls. He was methodical. His engineers dug a vast ring of trenches and built high platforms for the guns. They moved 150 cannons into position. Day and night, the thunder of the guns never stopped. Massive stone balls smashed into the timber walls, and incendiary shells turned the city's wooden houses into a furnace. While the guns roared above ground, a secret war was being fought below. Teams of sappers dug tunnels through the dirt, working 24 hours a day to reach the city's foundations. The defenders heard the digging and tried to dig their own tunnels to stop them. It was a terrifying fight in the dark, lit only by torches, where men stabbed and clubbed each other in narrow dirt passages. Eventually, the Russians managed to blow up the city's secret underground water supply. Suddenly, 40,000 people in Kazan were left with almost nothing to drink. To break the spirit of the city, Ivan's engineers spent weeks building a massive mobile siege tower. It was taller than the city walls and covered in wet animal hides, so the defenders could unset it on fire. As it rolled forward on giant wheels, Russian archers shot down at the Tatars from the top levels. It was a moving fortress, and it signaled that the final blow was coming. By October 2nd, the bloody Siege of Kazan reached its breaking point. At 10 in the morning, 2 massive gunpowder mines were detonated right under the city's main towers. The ground shook like an earthquake, and huge sections of the wall vanished in a cloud of fire and stone. Before the dust could even settle, Ivan gave the order. The Streltsy musketeers moved forward in disciplined ranks, firing volley after volley into the gaps. The fighting inside the city was a nightmare. It was house to house, street by street. Fires were everywhere, and the smoke was so thick you could barely see the man in front of you. By the afternoon, the organized defense had collapsed. The Khan, seeing that all was lost, finally surrendered. But there was no mercy. Ivan ordered the city cleared, and the streets literally ran red with blood. The next morning, Ivan the Terrible entered Kazan on foot. He walked through the shattered gates followed by priests singing hymns. He went straight to the central mosque, ordered it to be torn down, and had an Orthodox cross put in its place. Kazan would be rebuilt as a Russian city, a holy city, and the gateway to the East. This victory changed everything. It opened the door to Siberia and allowed Russia to expand all the way to the Pacific Ocean. It was the moment that Russia stopped being a collection of small states and became a Eurasian power. But it also set a dark pattern for Ivan's ruler belief that total victory and absolute fear were the only ways to govern. If you found this look into the birth of an empire fascinating, please hit that like button and subscribe for more deep dives into the shadows of the past. I'm the Sleeping Historian, and I'll see you in the next chapter of history.